One. Hey, so welcome to the show. Today we have a special guest. They're returning. It's Michael Sullivan and his wife, Robin. Michael is a best-selling fantasy author with 19 books out.
Oh, geez, I don't know.
17.
17? 17?
10, 16. Yeah, 17. Yeah.
17
Wow.
books out.
I'm impressed. He knows that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been taking his Ginkgo Balboa.
Yeah. Usually I have to do the math on it.
Yeah. So 17 books, traditionally independently published. Maybe you've even created a whole new way of publishing. We'll talk about that in a minute.
A little bit.
And then Robin Sullivan, who calls herself the worker bee, the alpha, beta, gamma reader. She certainly is the CFO, CEO, and COO of your company. I'm glad to have you on here to talk about your latest Kickstarter.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So why don't we just start right there, because it's pretty amazing what you've done with this last Kickstarter, because not only has it been a record, but this is a brand new book, first in series, correct?
It is.
Has it been a record?
Yeah. It
for us.
No, yeah, it's not a record for all of Kickstarter. I mean, Brandon Sanderson made $6.7 million or something.
That would have been cool if it was a record.
Yeah.
No, it's
well,
a
personal record.
A personal record.
Like I said, I'm coming to this information late.
No, personal record.
Personal record. Yes.
Yeah, I think right now Nolan is the 5th most funded Kickstarter in the fiction category of all time. And of course, Brandon Sanderson's number 1 at $6.7 million. So
you still have something to shoot for.
Still have something to shoot for. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I saw, is it Terry Brooks is running one right now too?
Yes. Terry. I always think of it as Sean Speakman because it's actually Grim Oak Press who is running it. But yes. Okay. Yeah. Terry Brooks. Yeah. Terry Brooks came in and knocked us down a peg. I think he's at 182,000 right now. We're at 157,000. But we're not complaining at all.
That's what you get for telling other people about this stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, see, I was on Sean Speakman for years to do Kickstarters. I mean, I was hounding him all the time. And then he finally did one for a novel of his own, Gray
Antiquity.
Yeah. The legend or the story of a gray antiquity or something like that. And then he talked to Terry about it and got Terry to do this next one. So, and in fact, Brandon just jumped in the last, I don't know, 6 months, something like that. So
yeah, it's recent.
It's finally starting to catch on. I mean, despite the fact that Brandon kicked all my Kickstarters down one peg because they were all in the top before he showed around. I'm really glad because his presence shows authors, that Kickstarters are important. And we've got a lot of indie authors into Kickstarting. Dirk's been doing them, and and Benedict Jackson and a couple of other people.
For a long time when we first started this, no one thought it was viable.
Yeah, everyone was like, meh.
Well, I think that's
our first encounter with this.
Can I use names or should it just be hiding?
Yeah, just say
a person.
A traditionally published author.
When I first started splitting off, I was doing a science fiction novel, and Orbit didn't want to necessarily pick that up. So we were going to shop it around, and we
got an offer on it.
We did get an offer on it, but
it just wasn't a great offer.
But we were talking to several authors at different conventions, and each of the authors were saying things like they would have a series of books, and they would have 2 of them put out. They had a fan base, but they weren't doing well enough for the publisher to actually pick them up for the 3rd one, and that was very disappointing both to them and their fan base. And we were saying, well, why don't you self-publish? And these people had always been traditionally published, and they just didn't know how to do that. And they didn't think they had enough money. Yeah, they think, well, to do it correctly, you would have to have a lot of money, and we don't know how to do that. So we said, well, Kickstart it. And they said, well, no, that's not going to work because, they don't know how to do that, and they didn't think it would make enough money.
Well, they didn't think that Kickstarter was viable at all. So the very first Kickstarter we did was to prove the viability.
And to put it into context, what year was that?
Oh, gosh.
You're I put out Hollow World. What's the copyright on Hollow World? Let's see what the copyright date is on this. We have that, right? Can you read it?
Yeah. So this was August of 2013. So this was probably I'm going to say March of 2013.
Okay.
Yeah. Somewhere along that time frame.
Yeah. So in order to prove to them, because they they all poo-pooed it and said it couldn't be done. So that was just like, you know, throwing live meat in front of Robin.
Yeah, you tell me something can't be done, and
So-
I'm gonna prove that wrong.
So she wanted to prove it wrong. So we took Hollow World, and instead of actually having it go through a publisher, we actually decided to try and do that ourselves and Kickstarter to see if we could raise your money. And the surprising thing, of course, that we discovered was the fact that the most of the people who backed that book were not my fans. They were
No.
not my readers.
They were just Kickstarter people.
And that was opening up a whole new, you know, bottle of potential readers that we didn't even know was there. And that was when the light bulb went on in our heads. We went, hey, this is not just a way of funding the book. This is a way of actually getting new, you know, people
Readership.
into a larger fan base. There's a whole new fan base pool. So that was one of the huge benefits we discovered. And that was one of the things we then,
So
she then started spreading around in her propaganda to tell everyone, no, you must try this.
well, and for every book that we had the rights to, which isn't many, because we sold a lot of rights to other companies. But for all of our independently published books, we always did a Kickstarter, and we always will do a Kickstarter now. And I don't, you know, I've said this before, and it turned out not to be true, but I don't think it'll change again. I've said several times, I will never traditionally publish another book. I won't. But then, you know, certain deals came along and they seemed too good to be true. And so we did, but I think we're now pretty much firmly in the, you know, we'll be self-published from now until forever. And there's a couple reasons for it. Number one is, you know, like even during this Kickstarter, a lot of people are asking me like, you know, we want hardcovers of the Riera books. And I'm like, well, Orbit won't make hardcovers of those books. Why? I don't know. I ask them all the time. But when we Kickstart, we can make whatever format we want. We can have audio formats. We can have hardcovers. We can have deluxe edition hardcovers, you know, so whenever we're tied to a publisher, we're really limited on what we can and cannot get them to produce. So staying self-published not only earns us more money, but it gives us
The flexibility to be able to serve our audience better.
yeah, exactly.
Wow. And, you know, it's funny. That's where all the money comes from. So if you take care of them, they actually, give you money?
Yeah. Really interesting thing. Like, you know, fans are loyal. Who knew?
So, since you've done this, I've talked about, it was probably the first time I saw you guys doing this was maybe 2 Kickstarters ago. And I've always told people about it. And one of the things I always get pushback on.
How much work it is.
No, it's not. It's,
oh, really?
Well, Michael can do that because he has this big audience. So it's easy.
Oh, yeah.
But I always say, but he didn't have an audience on Kickstarter. And oh, by the way, if you talk to him, Robin and Michael will tell you, they don't really use their mailing list like other people. So I'd love to hear from you. Like if you were telling an author that maybe like they do have an audience, but it's not.
That's the first point.
Thing,
that's the first point, right? Like I would not recommend this to debut authors.
Sure.
Now that said, I've backed many projects from debut authors. And in fact, we had one guy over here, the guy who did the book with the
Templars, yeah.
Yeah. And that was his first book. And
he did a Kickstarter.
And he did a Kickstarter for it. And in fact, he was launching the Kickstarter, you know, before he kind of came to me for advice. And I said, oh, I don't know. I'd do it for a debut novel. And he says, well, I kind of already crossed that bridge. And he did really well. I mean, he, you know,
but usually the whole point that we were making the first time was that we knew these people had been traditionally published. They already had an audience. They had a base. So, but this is before we actually got published.
But
with Hollow World through Kickstarter. But I'm saying that because they had that in advance, it was almost a no-brainer because they were gonna probably get funded because they already had people. But
there's been a lot of self-published authors who have done Kickstarters and done very well on it. They don't have big audiences.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to say it because they were traditionally they could do it. I meant they had a series, they had fans, they had people who were going to buy it anyway. And those people they could leverage into, you know, at least getting the establishment of funding.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, usually if you can do that, I think you answer this question, does it help to get it funded if people come to the Kickstarter and they see that it is already gaining traction? Or I mean, if you come to a Kickstarter and like no one's backed it, is that like going to Amazon and saying that there are no reviews on a book?
Well, I would think so. I mean, I've never been in that situation, so I'm not 100% sure, but there have been a lot of Kickstarters that, we've kind of given the Sullivan bump to, that they've been like really close, and we've just happened to say, hey, this is something you might want to look into. Matthew Wolf is a guy who's actually running a Kickstarter right now, and he was, he was kind of like, he was getting close, but he wasn't like quite there. And he does audiobooks with Tim Gerard Reynolds, and this was the Kickstarter for Tim Gerard Reynolds. So I usually, plug his Kickstarters simply because I want Tim Gerard Reynolds to get more work. So, if he gets his Kickstarter funded, then
for those who don't know, Tim Gerard Reynolds is the narrator of my novels. So.
Right. So, and Cory Doctorow did a really well-funded Kickstarter recently. So, there are more and more people. Again, I don't think it's good for debut, but if you are any author, self or traditional, if you have people who like your stuff, then I think Kickstarters make sense. We're good friends with, I'm such good friends with him. I can't remember his name. The guy who does the Cradle series. He's been over to our house.
Yeah.
What's his name? Yes, Will White. And I've been on Will White forever to do Kickstarters because he has just got a rabid fan base.
Sure. Yeah. And
I think I finally convinced, actually his father, he has a Robin, like Mike has a Robin, but his is in the form of his father.
Okay.
And I think I've convinced his father that they should do a Kickstarter. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes, because I think it'll do really well.
So bottom line is that if you already have some people, it's almost a no-brainer that you'll be successful at it. If you're starting out and you're brand new and you don't have because the thing is, if you can put up a polished example on a Kickstarter, people can look at that and say, oh, this is probably going to actually come to fruition. I will get this book. And I think, and also if you actually like it, then you're going to actually want to back it. So, but if it's completely brand new and you've never done anything and you've never even finished a novel in your life, they're like, what are the odds of him actually finishing the book or of it being any good at all?
Yeah.
So that's where it gets iffy. But if you have some backing or some success, then you'll probably be able to do it.
Right.
Well, where I've been really pushing authors is to use it for audiobooks.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
And now with BookFunnel being able to deliver audio and SoundWise, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that becomes a way that, that was the big problem. If you did an audiobook and you got it funded, is now how do I get it to those people?
Right.
Now there's ways to do that once you get it done. And I think that, that becomes, an easier hurdle. Because it's like, okay, I have the book, and people like the book. What I'm really trying to do is get the $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 to hire the narrator that I want.
Right.
And I've seen real good success with that.
Yeah. In fact, we may even be, this might be a scoop. We might even be doing a audiobook Kickstarter in the future. Right now, all of our books are under contract for this series. But there's a number of reasons why I want to do a self-published audiobook. Most importantly, because I can get our narrator compensated in the way I want to get him compensated. All the big publishers don't pay royalties to narrators, and I think that's a shame. Whereas if I hire him directly, I can set up a royalty scheme for him.
We really like to take care of the
narrators,
the talent who makes my book. Like Mark Simonetti, who does my covers, and Tim, who does the audio. These are the people who make me successful. So I want to make sure that they are happy with me
and well compensated for their work.
Yes.
Sure.
Part of the problem. Audiobook narrators, significantly contribute to the success of the book, and because they're part of SAG-AFTRA, they're just paid an hourly rate. Now, those hourly rates can be pretty stiff. And because they're in SAG-AFTRA, they also do get some retirement and healthcare money thrown in as being part of that union. But in general, they don't get royalties the way authors do. And I really think they should.
Well, maybe after we're done with this, we can talk. I've got some things you may be interested in as far as like the nuts and bolts of making that work.
Okay, cool.
Because I've been involved in a few of these audiobook Kickstarters have been successful and making it work. And the biggest thing is how you can, again, use this as a methodology for you to build another platform for your fans outside of the traditional things like Amazon and Nook and Audible.
Exactly.
So would you agree, Robin, that part of that equation is like what you set is your threshold? So like if I'm an author that's just getting started and let's say I've had some success on Amazon. I have, a couple thousand names on a list. I know people read my books. I want to do something here that it's iterative. So like, I'm not trying to do a Michael J. Sullivan style 6-figure thing. If it happens, great. But really what I have to set is my expectations for, realistically what I'm trying to do. Maybe it's raise $2,000 or $3,000.
Right.
And then can you talk to like how you've seen the audience and the platform grow from Kickstarter to Kickstarter?
Well, yeah, there's no question that, and again, some of that I'm going to harken back to people like Brandon Sanderson who are now getting involved in Kickstarter, because I'm going to venture to think that a lot of the people who backed the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter had never done a Kickstarter before.
They went, Kickstarter, what's that?
Yeah.
And now they're like, oh, this is a source.
But we happen to have a Kickstarter running at the same time that Brandon did. And we got a lot of backing in our Kickstarter, brand new people who just were like, oh,
what else is on the site?
Yeah, what else is out there? And they saw our stuff. In fact, the guy at the restaurant, that's how he got into it. He was on Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter and he backed ours for at the highest reward level. And he's now a new fan. So I think there definitely are more and more and more people going to Kickstarter without question. I mean that's just, even if you watch like Shark Tank, you'll see that they'll say, oh, well, we started with a Kickstarter, so it's just becoming more mainstream than it was, probably back in 2013. But as far as goal setting is concerned, to me, it's important for you to have a goal that it's kind of got to be in the Goldilocks zone, right? Like, I see a lot of Kickstarters where someone's like, I need $200 for my Kickstarter. And I'm like, if you need $200, why don't you just, cancel cable for a couple of months? Don't buy beer, or, in the old days, I used to say, don't go out for lunches. Now nobody goes out for lunches, but like in the old days.
So right now, no one has to have a Kickstarter because so many people have extra money.
That's right.
Except for those who right now don't have a job.
So if the amount is too small, to me, I'm like, you're just, I'm not going to say lazy, but come on.
It's not going to stir men's souls.
Yeah. So it has to be, like a decent amount of money, it has to be, something that like it would hurt to come out of your pocket, and so a couple $1,000s, I think that's reasonable. Obviously you want your thing to fund, and the sooner you can get it funded, the better. So I would rather set like if I think, if I'm looking at my thing and I can say, well, I'm going to be able to hit 10,000 easy peasy.
Mm-hmm.
I might set it at 5,000 just to be sure I get in there, because 5,000 is still, a good amount. Well, but then I'm at double funding.
Well, yeah. When we did Hollow World, I believe she worked out that it was going to cost $6,000 to print. So we did the Kickstarter for $3,000,
right?
Because we're going to go half and half with the reader. So if they could fund us for $3,000, we would fund us the second $3,000, and that would meet us halfway.
Right.
It did better than that.
It did better than that. Yeah. And nowadays, I set my Kickstarters usually at something below what my actual cost is. So if it's going to cost me, because for your listeners who don't know, we actually do print runs, and we do.
Yeah, I do want to go in depth on that at some point.
Okay. So our Kickstarters need a lot of money, because we're not doing print on demand. We have a really large upfront capital investment. And I used to do them, again, sort of like, the readers kick in half and we kick in half, and, and they always overfunded. So it ended up, they paid for the whole thing. But, that was kind of the way I chose mine. But yeah, like not too small. If it's too small, then you look lazy. But then I see some people, like this is my debut novel and I need to raise $50,000. And I'm like, no, dude, you are not going to make it. You're going to go down the tubes, but
yeah.
good on you for at least like thinking big, I guess.
Yeah. That's a lack of research when you think about what the average novel never makes 10,000 in its lifetime. So,
yeah, exactly.
So this is a good segue. Is can you talk like about why you're raising this money and kind of, this isn't like you need it. This is part of a broader approach that you're doing to actually give your fans some special treatment.
Exactly.
As well as how you're then packaging that with your distribution methodology that I mean, I don't even know what you would call it. Like, because it's not indie, it's not traditional. It's
I call it self-publishing plus. Okay. That's the way I term it. So a couple things. Number one is for most people, Kickstarters are a way of getting money that they don't have in order to get something made. In other words, if I don't get this money, I can't make this thing. Now for us, you know, we can probably get a hardcover print run even without Kickstarter backers. But the thing that we have seen, and the reason why we're so high on Kickstarters, is there is a certain excitement about being part of a Kickstarter project and helping to make something come to life. And certainly there are some things that we can do with Kickstarter that we would never do without Kickstarter. And I'll give you an example. Not our Kickstarter right before this was for a series called Legends of the First Empire. Now, the first 3 books of that series are published through Del Rey, and we self-published the last 3 books through that series. And the last and all 3 of the last books had Kickstarters, and they went very well, and it was nice. But when we got done, I saw our 6 books sitting on the shelf, and I'm like, you know, I would really like a nice little slipcase that goes around those books. Now, slipcases, when you have just one made up, are very expensive, and they're hard to get done. It's hard to find someone to do just one, because all the people who make slipcases, I mean, they want, you know, several hundred slipcases. And of course, their pricing goes down significantly depending on how many you have. But I wanted a slipcase. And I was like, well, I could order 100 slipcases for myself and pay all that money just to have my one on the shelf, you know, or, you know, and to be honest, I had no idea if anyone would want these things, right? So I was just like, well, I don't know, let's just see. And I ran a Kickstarter for it. And the response to that was just much more than I ever thought. I think we ended up doing a first print run of 1,100 of them. And then I think I went back for like maybe another 500 of them or something like that. So they were very, very successful, you know, and again, that was me wanting something that I couldn't get on myself, but those people made that possible. You know, they all have these pretty little slipcases now on their desks, something that wouldn't have existed except for Kickstarter.
I think a lot of people have misconceptions about Kickstarter, and they think that people are either investing in a product that they're going to get returns from, or like we had someone on a website said, well, you've made more money than you expected, so what are you going to do with all that extra money? What they don't realize is that this is really a means of simply pre-ordering the product.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the publishing model that has been used for centuries now is completely weird in the sense that the publisher prints up all these books in the hope that someone will buy them. And when they don't, they take a huge loss. But what Kickstarter does, it allows you to sell the books ahead of time. Right. And then you can print up exactly the number that you need. And we always do a bit over because, of course, we're going to be selling more than that. Right. And then it's what they're already paid for. So we're not on the line for expending to a printer, because we know exactly how many are going to be sold because we've already sold them and we have the money. It's just a much more sensible way of doing things. In other words, if I went out and I was going to make dining room tables and I found out I have 10 friends who want dining room tables, then I know that I'm going to, everyone kick in the money, I'll buy the materials, build it, and I'll give you that. That's exactly what we're doing. Right.
Well,
so beyond that.
Another industry that's been revolutionized by this is the board game and gaming marketplace.
They're wild on Kickstarter.
Right.
Oh my God.
So you don't, you know, the old days you would, a game company would make a game and hope it would sell.
Right. Now
and hope they,
Kickstarter.
now you go to Kickstarter, get it going. After that, if you notice, a lot of those guys will actually have a tier for gaming stores to buy in at an early stage.
Right.
So, so it's completely flipped the whole model on its head and made it more profitable for everybody.
It does. And the other part that I was saying, besides me getting stuff that I couldn't normally get without my backers, is I think the backers really feel a sense of ownership in it. You know, they feel like they helped make this happen, and they tell their friends about it. Now, and one of the things that we always do in our Kickstarters, which I think is a huge perk, this is probably one of the places where me and Will White have issues, because his fans would be opposed to this. But we let the people who back the Kickstarter get the ebook months and months and months before it hits the retail stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really cool for them, because they get to read a story that no one else can read, right? It's only because I'm a special Kickstarter person that I get to read the story in April rather than August. Number one. But number two, we actually print their names right in the books. I think in Age of Empire, there's probably 20 pages just of people's names. And so they can, and sometimes they don't put their own name in there. Sometimes they'll put their kid's name in there, and they can bring the book down off the shelf and say, see, look, this is something, see this book, this is something I helped make. See, my name is right there.
But in addition to that, because they backed the Kickstarter, because they feel they had a role in bringing this to the world, then when they read the book, they actually kind of have an added incentive to review it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people who back it tend to like me because they've read other things by me, so they're going to be predisposed. But in addition to that, because they're involved in it, it's like, well, they'll be just a little bit more inclined to give you a better review. So initially, those first reviews that come out will probably be of a better quality than perhaps they might be just off the street. So that's an additional side benefit.
And it generates pre-release buzz, right? So after the Kickstarter ends, really the only place people can get copies of the book is through their pre-orders on Amazon or whoever. But you already have these people talking about it. Oh, I'm reading Nolan. Oh, okay.
And they'll say, how? It's not out yet. And they go, oh, well, see, I'm cool because I was.
Yeah, I got behind the velvet rope.
You were on the Kickstarter. Didn't know there was a Kickstarter. Well, you need to pay more attention next time. Now, damn it. And then I get all these comments coming in like, oh, this is my first Kickstarter for Sullivan. It's like, so it's like I don't know. It's like a thing now. People just want to do it because they've heard about it for so long. They've heard about other people getting into it, like they're in a club, and now they get to be into it. So it becomes a thing of itself. It's like, the cool new thing that you want to join in.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I think that authors tend to get hung up on that you're talking about is they're worried about that early audience getting things and it's going to hurt their ranking in the future.
Well, that's exactly Will's issue. Without question.
Well, and you can tell Will next time you're talking to him, like Dakota Kraut, who is similar genre.
Yeah, I know Dakota.
Yeah,
so I've heard the name. I don't.
Yeah, so he has a Patreon where people are on that Patreon so they can see the works very early stage. Similarly, the Galaxy's Edge guys, they write military science fiction. They have their own private membership site. And they set that up to allow their fans to get early access to books because they signed deals with Amazon to put out their ebooks when they put out the audiobooks. So now they got pushed to like a traditional schedule where they have to wait till it gets out from the narrator. Well, their fans didn't want to wait. So they have this recurring revenue that's coming through and it's done the exact opposite. It hasn't hurt their business. It's helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that especially at that kind of level, if you're not really in a position anymore where you're going to hurt your rank that much.
Well, the thing with Will is with his latest release, he was #1 in the Amazon store. I think the release before that got to like #5 in the Amazon store, but he got to #1. And what I'm telling him is it's like Michael with the New York Times bestselling. I mean, you just got to be a New York Times bestseller once, and you're a New York Times bestseller for the rest of your life. So he can say on every book he publishes from now into the future, from the #1 Amazon bestseller.
Mhm.
So, it's not like he has to hit #1 every time. And so if a certain number of fans get quote unquote bled off through the Kickstarter, you're going to make more money because Amazon's not getting their cut, right? And they're going to have access to paperbacks and hardcovers, which they don't have right now.
You have more numbers of units to sell because of more versions to sell. Yeah.
Right. So
which is why publishers have been doing that for years. I mean, how many different versions of Tolkien's series are there now?
Yeah, different covers.
Well,
different
we're talking about Brandon Sanderson's #1 Kickstarter, millions of dollars. It's an old book.
Yeah, it is. It's 10 years old.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the part that we tend to forget is that the audience that really is endearing or thinks these products are dear, they're prepared to pay money for it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And in the case of when you look at what happens with rank and worrying about that #1 spot, I think we give too much credit to the Amazon
algorithm
machine god. It's really his audience showing up on game day. That's really what it is. And the same thing happens on Kickstarter. And they're probably, I would argue that they're probably two very different audiences. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think a lot of authors have, like these complexes as to like why they've made it, right? Mark Lawrence famously says over and over and over again, my publisher made me what I am. And I say, no, Mark, your writing made you what you are. Your publisher helped some people find it, but they're not coming back because of your publisher. They're coming back because they enjoy your writing. And I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, if you're not writing stuff that people enjoy, it doesn't matter what you do. Amazon, Kickstarter, Patreon, if no one likes what you write, you're not going to be successful. But if you are connecting with people, then there's all kinds of opportunities available for you.
Yeah,
but
that's why you
got to start with a good book.
Yeah, that's why there's 8 million titles on Amazon that nobody reads.
Right. Yeah.
So I'd love for you to kind of go in depth of like you've got the Kickstarter done, you've got the money, and then there's a process for fulfillment for Kickstarter, for the behind the velvet rope special stuff for fans that's early access, and then what you do, kind of transition into how you basically publish and distribute your own books to mass media. Right.
So first of all, I should talk about some additional software outside of Kickstarter.
Okay.
One of them is called BackerKit. Another one is called Pledgebox. And I just recently ran across another one. I can't remember exactly what their name is. It's Crowd something or other. But these are tools that what they basically do is they suck all the data out of Kickstarter automatically for you. They just suck that all out. And then they put it into their system. And within their systems, they have mechanisms that makes it very easy for you to distribute things. For instance, in BackerKit, if you have ebooks, you just have to post your ebook once and you associate it with a reward code. This is for people who had an SKU of the ebook, and boom, it gets sent out to everybody. They send emails, and there is an extra process that happens for all Kickstarter type things, because it's not like going to a store where you got to get their address, and usually you need to get some additional information from them. For instance, like if they buy an extra ebook for a friend, you might need the email address of who they want that sent to. Or in our case, where we're going to put their names in the book, we need a place for them to fill in what their name should be in the book. So these surveys that go out after the Kickstarter funds, these other tools make that process easier. Okay. They have automatic reminders that go out. So like, the one kind of a obnoxious thing about Kickstarters, and I'm probably just a little more conscientious about it than some, is some people won't fill out their surveys. And if they don't fill out their surveys, I don't know where to send their books to, right? I mean, I can't give them what they paid for. And so sometimes I spend an inordinate amount of time
Chasing them.
Herding the cats, saying,
Yeah, the one straggler, right?
Yeah, please give me your address so I can send you this book. Now, in some respects, I got their money. So like, if I was a less than conscientious person, I would say, hey, I got your money. You're not getting your stuff. Yeah. Too bad, too sorry. But I get really upset when I have people that I can't get things to, So yes, but these tools help with that because they will send reminders, to the person. Oh, you haven't done your survey yet. Oh, you haven't done your survey yet. And they also provide links to.
Do they get more and more obnoxious? Like,
no.
You idiot. You moron. What are you doing? It's like, well, we're calling the police now. We're to find you because we think you're in a river somewhere.
Well, I have some added advantages because I'm like, the book is going on the press next week. If you don't fill out your survey by the end of next week, your name will not be in the book. There's just nothing I can do about it. And inevitably, I'll get an email from someone like 3 weeks later, or after the books, they'll see that the books have arrived. And then they're like, they fill out their survey. And I'm like, I'm sorry, there's 12,000 of these printed up. I can't really do anything about the fact that your name's missing.
Each one, I can add their name.
Yeah. So they have these tools that help with stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They also provide a mechanism, for instance, to allow people to join the Kickstarter after the fact. Okay. So for instance, in BackerKit, when they suck everything out of Kickstarter into BackerKit, you can just hit a button and set up an online store. And so if someone missed the Kickstarter, they say, oh, I didn't know the Kickstarter was ending. I'm so bummed. You can just give them this link and they can go in and they can choose their reward level, just like someone in the Kickstarter, and they can have their add-ons. Now, Kickstarter recently added support for add-ons. And for what people don't, may not know what that is like, you might decide that you're going to make t-shirts for your project. Well, not everyone wants a t-shirt. So you would make that as an add-on. You'd say, okay, contribute an extra $20 and we'll send you a Kickstarter. So no matter what your level is, you could have an ebook and still get a t-shirt, or you could have the deluxe edition and still get a t-shirt. These add-ons allow them to kind of customize things.
I think I noticed that in this last one. And were you like selling backlist stuff as well?
Yes. So a lot of the people who are coming into this Kickstarter are new to Michael's writing. So we provided ways for them to, as an add-on, buy the Rhaenyra Revelations, or buy the Rhaenyra Chronicles, or buy the Legends of the First Empire. So, and those books already exist. So I can either choose to ship those things with the Kickstarter, or since they already exist, I'll just ship them, as soon as the Kickstarter funds out. So they'll get them earlier, and that way they got something to read while they're waiting for the other thing to be produced. Now, like I said, there's several different tools that do this. BackerKit is probably the most well-known one. I like BackerKit a lot. I think they do an excellent job. I think they really have a great system. My only complaint is they're a little on the pricey side, because what they will do is they will take 2% of the money that you get from Kickstarter, and then they'll get 5% of any add-ons that were added through their store. Okay. Now, Pledgebox, which is what I used for my last Kickstarter, they take none of the Kickstarter money, and they only take 2% of anything that was bought as an add-on through their system. So they're much less expensive. Now, they're not quite as full featured, but I think I figured out something like for the last Kickstarter, when I actually switched over to them, I saved like $5,000 by using them rather than BackerKit. So I'm like, is it worth the $5,000 for me to have not quite as much functionality or not? But they're both good systems. Now, talk about what you were mentioning about the fulfillment after two things: fulfillment and then selling after the Kickstarter. So there are all kinds of companies that do fulfillment for Kickstarters. And what you'll do is you would extract a spreadsheet out of either backer kit or Kickstarter, and you would send it to the fulfillment partner, and you would ship all your product to the fulfillment partner, and they would physically print the labels for the individual people. They would put the books in a box, stick the label on the box, and mail it out. And then they would give you back the tracking number that you would then put into your system so that people can follow their stuff. So there are people who will do this for you. There are hundreds of fulfillment companies all over the country that do this. Now, up until very recently, we had a fulfillment partner that was about about an hour's drive from our house, called Box In, Box Out. And I think they fulfilled 3 of our Kickstarters. I think they did Age of Legend, Age of Death, and Age of Empire. And so again, we sent them a spreadsheet. You know, Mike would come in and he would sign all the books, and then we would leave and they would print and they would send them out. Now, when COVID-19 happened, 2 things happened. One is they changed their facility. They used to be in their own little building, and then they started getting some space within a really big warehouse for a very large company called Plow and Hearth, which is a big retailer. And getting access there, like the Plow and Hearth did not want like anyone coming onto the floor where all their product was. I don't think I was going to walk out with a couch or something, but okay. So it was harder and harder for us to get access to the books to sign them. So very recently, we actually have left Box In and Box Out, and we are now doing our own fulfillment again. Very early in the Kickstarter, we did our own fulfillment. Then for some of the middle Kickstarters, we had someone else do our fulfillment. And our latest Kickstarter, we did our own fulfillment. Now, the Kickstarter that's just about to end, whether we're going to do our fulfillment or we're going to send it to someone else, I haven't really decided yet. It's just, everything is kind of wonky right now because of COVID. Like, yeah, because some places get shut down, you know, and then some people have limited workforces. And, you know, the thing I know for sure is if I have to ship them out one way or another, they're going to get shipped out, right? Because I have full control over myself and my daughter who helps me ship. But for the people who don't want to do their own shipping, there are all kinds of companies that do this for you. You ship the product there and, you know, it's done.
The other thing that she managed to fix over the years is that in the early years when she was doing her own fulfillment, she was doing it completely wrong.
I was.
Because she was offering things in the Kickstarter that were really not too bright.
Yes. And what
now she's gotten it.
And
solved.
What he's referring to is in my early Kickstarters, you could have the book dedicated, you know, to David, Michael J. Sullivan. Well, that's fine, but there's no fulfillment company in the world who will marry up a shipping label to a name. They just won't. So if you want to have a fulfillment company do your stuff, you need to have all the books the same. They're just signed Michael Sullivan.
Yeah.
And again, in the old days, we did things a little stupidly in the fact that we would literally have thousands of pounds of books in big boxes, and we would have to take them out of the box, put them on the table. Mike would sign them, then we'd have to put them back in the box, and then we'd give them to the fulfillment partner to ship. Now we're doing something, I don't know how much people know about books, but books are made up of things called signatures. They're like, sometimes they're 32 pages, sometimes they're 16 pages, but they fold over a bunch of paper into a single thing. And then if you ever look at the side of a book, you can sometimes see them.
Yeah, like the folios.
The little folios, right?
If you look at there should be individual folds up there where you can see at the top of the spine.
So what we can do now is we have the printer send us just the first signature, the 32 pages or whatever, and then Mike can sign those, and then they go back to the printer such that when they leave the printer, they are signed. They don't have to come to him.
What he means by leaving the printer, meaning that they're going from there to the bindery. But they haven't been bound yet. They're literally flat pages.
Yeah, when we get them, they're flat.
So when I sign those, then the printer sends those out off, you were saying, to a binder. They're then bound with my signature already in it.
Right. There's another way of doing it too. There's something called a tip-in. Sean Speakman uses these a lot for his things where he has like a lot of different authors who are signing his anthologies. And a tip-in is nice because it's just a single piece of paper, and there might be 50 different authors who sign that single piece of paper. The only problem with a tip-in is and we haven't seen this happen, but in theory, they could come out because they're
Okay.
not as, they're glued in there, but they're not quite as.
They're not actually stuck.
Yeah, they're
They're not bent in. Like,
they're not bent in like a
not part of a
signature. I mean, you'd have to pull out an entire signature, which generally doesn't happen. So we have avoided the tip-ins just because, a long time ago, we had one printer who was really bad, and we actually had pages that came out of the book. And so I've just always been, and they did not use signatures. They had, each page was individually glued.
but it certainly made sense for him, because what he was doing is he had, I forget, like maybe 30 different authors all over the world.
Yeah.
So he had to send this box of pages,
500 pages.
and I would get it and I would sign mine and I'd send it to the next author and they would sign theirs and they send it to the next. So it traveled all over the world. It took, I don't know, 6 months or so.
It takes a long time.
So yeah, to send more than that would have been insane.
Yeah. So, but again, what that allows us to do now is like this problem we had getting into this warehouse as far as COVID-19 was concerned. We don't have to get into the warehouse because the books are leaving the printer with Michael's signature already in them. So that opens up some other things.
But yeah, over the years of her doing this, she's figured out what works and what doesn't, what perks will be functional and what perks are just a nightmare to try and fulfill. So she's figured this out. So now she can probably do the fulfillment a lot easier.
Yeah. Don't personally dedicate your books. Like, that's fine if you get a Kickstarter with like 30 people, but if you've got 2,000 people, that's a nightmare. But then the other thing you were talking about, and this is where the self-publishing plus comes in, is most self-publishers, if they have physical books at all, they're print-on-demand trade paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are some ways you can get print-on-demand hardcovers, but they're a little bit on the pricey end. Because we do a print run, we actually have books in bookstores. Okay. And part of that is because we partner with Grim Oak Press, who is a publisher who has a relationship with Ingram, who is the largest distribution of books to everyone. That's part of it. The thing I want to caution people about, because whenever they hear about this, they think, oh, what a great idea. There's one other caveat about this. So to have your books sold through a bookstore, you have to be in the distribution chain, right? They have to be able to buy the books from Ingram. And that's semi-easy to have happen. But just because they can buy them from Ingram doesn't mean they will buy them from Ingram.
Right.
Because bookstore shelf space is very limited, okay? So this is where Michael's traditional publishing background is an aid to him, because he has books in bookstores. He has a track record of books in bookstores. So when Michael Sullivan comes out with a new title, the bookstore buyers can see, oh, well, he sold X thousands of copies of this book and Y thousands of copies of this book. So they say, okay, so we're going to pre-order 2,000, 3,000, 6,000, 7,000, however many thousand books, because he has a track record. If this is your first book, and even though you might go through the issue or go through the extra work of, doing a print run and having a warehouse to store them in and having a relationship with Ingram that would allow bookstores to purchase them, does not necessarily mean that those are going to sell.
Even if you were a publisher like Orbit, you're still not going to get your book into the bookstores. They actually create a full color catalog, which they have salespeople that go to the different meetings, that go to the different bookstore meetings, and they show them, and they're like, these are the books we think are going to sell really well this year. And they basically sell them on the books. Right. Now, most authors are not going to be doing that around the country. So, right. But that's what they do because traditional publishers have always been really good at selling to bookstores and book buyers. Not in the past have they done much for getting to readers, because that usually does the bookstore's job. Yeah, it's changed obviously over the years, but that used to be how it was. And so that's what they're really good at, is getting book buyers and book stores and libraries even, I suppose, to buy into these things. And they have a whole system for that, which the average author, we can't even do it, because I would have to have multiple books that I could put in a catalog then to present to them, but we don't have.
Yeah. So we have, what I generally say is most self-published authors will not find their books in bookstores. And then I followed that up with, although we are self-published and our books are in bookstores, but it's partially because Michael was A, traditionally published, B, sold well when he was traditionally published, and C, still sells even to this day. I mean, Theft of Swords, which is his first traditionally published book, is on its 18th printing, so it's still available through bookstores on a regular basis. So,
So there's a residual that you're kind of drafting on.
There is a system that we have already been interjected into.
It's kind of like Amazon, that once you achieve a certain rank, it kind of keeps you there, even though you drop temporarily, you kind of remain in that same area. So if you're in a bookstore and you have a consistency there, then even if you do disappear or your rank drops throughout, you'll still be allowed a large grace period before it actually does drop. Yes.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I guess the bottom line is that even if you my bottom line is, I don't want authors to overextend themselves. And I think for most of them to do I say to a lot of people, watch what we do and copy what we do, but not everything, because
they can literally copy everything we do. But it's like, if you're playing a computer game, we're at level 20. If you're at level 1, don't try and go into this zone yet.
The monster's going to kill you.
You're going to get killed, right? Work your way up to that level and then copy what we do.
Right.
Well, I think that's a big part of this thing, is people comparing their beginning to your end, right?
Okay,
that you've been playing a lot more rounds of this game.
Yes. But I will also say that, like people always say, well, it's easy for you. You're Michael J. Sullivan. But he wasn't always Michael J. Sullivan.
Right.
Like I was talking to an author recently. I can't remember who it was or what it was about. But they said something like, well, I've only sold. I know. They have 2 books out. Okay. And they were upset because they weren't selling as well as they wanted to. They were traditionally published and so forth. And I said, well, first of all, 3 is the magic number. Like, before you have 3 books out, it takes a while for people to actually find you. And sometimes it's even more than 3. But I was also talking to someone who was self-publishing. They're like, yeah, so I've got these 2 books out and I've only sold 5,000 copies. I said, well, how long have they been available? And they said, well, they've been available for, 6 months. I said, do you know how many books Michael sold a month when he had 2 books out and he'd only been published for 6 months? And I said, no. I said, we were lucky to get remember when it was a book a day? Remember, it would be 30 books a month. Remember that?
I couldn't tell you. I just know it was hardly anything.
Yeah. So, you sold 5,000. And when we were exactly where you were, we were selling 30. Okay. So you're
not getting as much money for that 30.
Yeah. So you're already far, far, far more ahead than we were. When Michael first started publishing, I remember when his book sales went from 1 book a month to 2 books a month, and then we would have 60 books a month. I was like, and I'm talking to ebooks, people. I'm not even talking about print books. I'm talking ebooks.
We have enough money to go out to dinner today.
I know. Yeah, it was. So Michael wasn't always selling, millions of books. He was selling a couple of books a day.
It took the 2 of us working quite hard for 2-3 years. I put out, and I had already written the book, so I had already started, 8 years before that. So I wrote all the books, and then once we started publishing them, and we were putting them out every 6 months.
It was book 5.
It was book 5 that finally showed that, hey, I can make some money at this. Prior to that, it really was just a hobby that, well, this is kind of nice. We make a little bit of money, but it was never going to go anywhere. So literally it was 20 years of learning how to write. And then I was 2004 to so 8 years, no, 4 years.
4 years.
4 years of literally writing the series without any expectations of it getting anywhere. I had no guarantee whatsoever. I wrote these books without even knowing I was any good. I thought I was, sure, everyone does. There's a certain arrogance all writers have to have if they're going to make it. So I wrote that, based on that. And then she had to learn how to self-publish because we couldn't get into the big, what was it, 6 back then?
Now it's 4.
Yeah, I know. Soon there'll be none. So it's just all that work. And in an era in which there was, first of all, no Kindle. There are people who self-published, printed their books and put them in their trunks and tried to sell them at conventions.
We self-published before there was a Kindle.
Yeah.
That's not an easy road to hoe.
So before the Kindle, you also had no artists who were doing book covers. You had no available editors because at that time, most of the editors were actually working for publishers. That has since changed. So this whole industry has blown up around
so much easier now.
Of which Kickstarter is one of those things that makes it,
so
possible.
much easier now.
Well, and I would add into that, I've observed with some of my clients in the last 12 to 18 months, they've doubled their revenues with the same IP because of how fast audiobooks are growing.
Well, audiobooks is everything. It's everything right now. And that's, so going back to this, like why will never be traditionally published again. Okay. So when our first contract came out, I asked my agent, I said, will you please hold back audio rights? And the reason why I asked her to hold back audio rights, we had a connection lost. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. There was a little blink. Did you see that?
See it, no.
Okay. I said, could you please hold back the audio rights? Because at the time, there used to be this thing called, was it Patio Books?
Yeah.
And there were some authors out there, Nathan Lowell and Scott Sigler, who were making some money with Patio Books. And it was a system by which the authors read their books and people could donate whether they wanted to pay the person or not. And I thought, well, we'll keep those and, we might make money off of it. The agent said, no, I can't keep the audio rights. They want them. If you want this deal, you got to sell them audio rights. And at the time, audio rights were not very important. No. And I said, well, okay, fine. And when they sold those audio rights to record books, they got $2,000 for them. Okay. Not very much money at all. And I was like, okay, well, it's $2,000 more than I had, what do I care? Then the second contract came. And again, by this time, audio rights were getting a little bit more traction. I said, I'd like to keep back the audio rights. They said, no, they won't keep back the audio rights. They refused, blah, 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 blah. Okay, gave them the audio rights. When it came time for the third series, I said, screw it. By this time, the audio rights were going pretty good. And I actually sold the audio rights first for that series, knowing full well that I might be shooting myself in the foot because some publishers might say, well, if I can't get the audio rights, then you can't have a contract. But I didn't think I was going to be traditionally published anymore anyways. So I sold those audio rights for $140,000 for 4 books. And I thought, wow, this was just the snizzle, right?
Yeah.
And then Del Rey came along and I said the audio rights were gone. They said, that's fine. We'll buy the books without the audio rights. So they gave us an advance of more than $500,000. And I was like, cool, That's why I said I thought those would be self-published, but someone offered me $500,000. I thought, well, I'm never going to make $500,000 self-publishing, so I'll sell them the audio rights, or I'll sell them the print rights. Later on, when the last 3 books became available, I went back to Del Rey. I said, hey, Del Rey, remember you bought these other books. The audio rights are still gone. And they said, uh-oh, big problem. We cannot buy any title, none, zero, zippo, zilch, that doesn't have the audio rights. And even though we love you and we're making great money on your books, it's a corporate policy and there's just nothing we can do. So that forced us back into self-publishing for those books. Now,
that corporate decision may be their death knell.
Well, interestingly enough, okay, now, you know how publishing works, right? The first book is going to make the most money, right? Because that's the most copies, right? And then the second book will make some percentage of that. And the third will make some percentage of that and so forth. Well, the whole reason why I sold those first 3 books to Del Rey is because I didn't think I would ever make $500,000 on them on my own. Well, those last 3 books in the series, the ones that were really far down and have been out for a lot less time, they have more than out-earned the first 3 books of the series. Wow. Okay. So then I was like, oh, so I don't even need, I mean, despite the fact that the audio rights was a big deal, right? I mean, I can make more self-publishing those than these.
And then on top of that,
well, and then, you know, came the next series. And when the next series came out, no, when we got ready to sell the next series, I knew I wasn't going to traditional publisher. I knew I was going to sell the audio rights first. So I went to several audio producers and said, you know, give me your best deal, right, on these 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
And the money that came back I went like, I think you've got your zeros wrong or something, you know. I mean, it was just like a phenomenal amount of money. And the most disappointing thing for me ever was this company that we love and who has treated us greatly and we love, and we would have loved to have books released through them. Their number came in like $250,000 less than somebody else's. And they said, well, you know, let us go back, you know, we'll beat that number. I said, no, I'm not trying to get into a bidding war here. You know, I said, give me the best you can give me and we're going to make our decision. And so we went with the other company. And I felt bad because I thought they gave us more than a fair offer, right? And they've done everything good to us. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, business is business. And, you know.
Well, I mean, technically both companies
do good by us. Yes.
Very good.
Yes,
Sure.
I have no complaints about either one of those.
Right.
But what it proved to us was that
the audio is where it's all at.
The audio, the money we got up front from the audio, not residuals, not, you know, royalties, but the money we got up front was more than we would probably ever even dream of getting from any traditional publisher.
For just audio. And they would require print, ebook, and audio.
And would have given us a fraction
of
of the advance.
Just a small fraction.
And we would have made a great deal less money on the back end. So it's like, It makes absolutely no sense to ever go through traditional publisher at this point ever again, so long as the audio is as lucrative as it is. And of course, if they're making that kind of money and are capable of paying that up front, then it's very possible that if we did it ourselves, it would probably even be better. But.
Right.
Well, yeah. And that's what I would say is what I'm seeing with my clients, that in science fiction and fantasy, where there are folks that probably haven't picked up a book since high school and didn't even read that one, they are devouring audio.
They are.
And you get the right narrator. And he may be $2,000 a finish hour,
right?
But he could read out of a telephone book and people would buy that.
Yeah.
And you get the right narrator and the right storyteller packaged together. It's the only limiting factor then becomes that narrator can only narrate so many books.
Right.
And now you have to be tied to his schedule. But it is amazing how much these authors that are at that level are able to make now in audio.
But that is why the publishers are requiring audio.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not increasing their advance
to
compensate for that. But what's even worse is the amount you get per book is so much less, because like when we publish a book through Audible Studios, you know, their standard contract is 15% of what they get in.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're with someone like, let's say, let's talk about the very first Orbit deal. Remember I told you it was that $2,000?
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't produce the audiobook. They did not feel strongly enough in the success of this book that they would even produce it themselves. They did not want to make that investment. So they sold it to Recorded Books, who is an audio producer, for the $2,000. And then Recorded Books produced it and put it onto the internet, or put it onto Audible. So the way the money breaks down is Audible keeps 65% of the money because it's on their platform. 35% of that goes to Recorded Books. 25% of that 30% goes to Orbit. And Orbit splits it with us 50-50. So we're getting 3.5% for every single copy sold. Where if I'm directly with Audible Studios, I actually get more than 15%, but I can't tell you what that is because it's a non-disclosure situation. So instead of getting 3.5% per book, I can get this higher rate, at least 15%. But then if I go to ACX, now I'm up at 40%, right? Now, yes, I have to pay a lot out of my pocket because I have to pay the narrator and the
Sure.
engineer and the sound recording and all that. But still,
I guess we could do a Kickstarter.
we could do a Kickstarter.
It's
to
funny
put
how
all
that
money.
is.
If anyone wanted an actual audiobook of one of my books narrated by Tim Gerard Reynolds,
Which I think someone might want that.
this might be a good idea.
Maybe we should do that. You know what?
Well, and what
This
if
audio thing
you
might go somewhere.
what if you could sell that audiobook direct?
Well, yes, but now here's the only problem, okay? And don't think that I'm not thinking about that. The only problem is if we look at our Kickstarters, which are very successful, right? And one of the great things about Kickstarters is the overhead to middlemen is very small, right?
Mhm.
Kickstarter is taking 5%, and then you got to pay like 3% for the credit card processing fees, right? So combined, it's like 8%. The problem is, so when I did a long time ago, when we were under a non-compete with Del Rey, I wanted to put out a book called The Disappearance of Winter's Daughter, which was a Rhaenyra book. And contractually, I could not publish a Rhaenyra book because I was under contract with Del Rey for Legends of the First Empire, and they wouldn't let any book based in Elan come out, even though it had nothing to do with their series. So what I did was I did a Kickstarter for Disappearance of Winter's Daughter. And for an entire year, until this other contract non-compete came up, the only place you could buy Disappearance of Winter's Daughter was directly through us on our website, right? Because I was not allowed to have it published. I could not have it on Amazon. I could not have it here. I could not have it there. So I had an entire year where you could only buy that book from us. Now, really great margins, right? Because I didn't have Amazon's cut in there. I didn't have anyone's cut in there. The only cut I had in there was the credit card processing fee of 3%.
Mm-hmm.
When I got done with that, and we finally were able to put that book on Amazon, okay, I thought, well, we have bled off like all the readers, right? So, which I was fine with. I made tons of money. I was happy. Well, in like the first 2 weeks that book was on Amazon, I made more than I did over that whole year. Okay. Because it just had so much more exposure.
Sure.
So that really woke me up to the fact that, yeah, you can kind of, sell things yourself, but those other platforms definitely are worth having around.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. Okay. Now with audiobooks, Amazon or Audible, same entity, they have two different royalty rates for whether you're exclusive or non-exclusive. If you're non-exclusive, you get 20%. If you're exclusive, you get 40%. Okay. So here's what I would suggest to people who are thinking about doing audiobooks. Do your Kickstarter, have it exclusive with yourself, put it on, put it up there through, BookFunnel or through this other company you talked about. But then submit it to the ACX program. And once it gets approved through the ACX program, you take it out of those other two venues, and then it's exclusive to Audible at 40%. Otherwise, you're going to have it at 20% to still have it in those things. But at the time, because you're kind of bleeding off at the front end, when their stuff isn't there, there's no exclusivity before you have a contract with them, right? Before you're official with them. So you can sell off as many copies ahead of time. And you should really try to sell as many copies ahead of time.
Oddly enough, you're saying to hybrid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hybrid.
And to that point, what we've seen is because ACX is, or Audible or whoever is in this, I think it's Audible in this, is taking so long to get books out.
Yes. There's a huge problem. Then you can sell it yourself. You're just
selling and selling because
and then they finally go live, and then you take them down.
Then
and
you can take it down.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, because it used to be ACX would put your book up pretty quickly, but now there are huge delays. Months and months.
Yeah, and the more that people have seen that simultaneous release helps everything sell more. They've been trying to do that, and now you can't because when's that book going to come out?
Right.
When they get around to it.
Right. Yeah. So play by the rules, right? When
Absolutely.
you're with them, you're exclusive. But hey, if they're not going to put your book out for 8 months and you have it done, sell it yourself for those 8 months. Why not sell it on BookFunnel or
SoundView is the other one. Yeah.
SoundView?
Think of them of kind of like if Audible is Amazon, SoundView is Shopify.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
But
it's not one I know, but
yeah, it's fairly new, but their whole, what's nice is you can do things like you can set up a subscription service. So you could set up a thing where people could subscribe and you could just keep loading all your audiobooks in there.
I see. Yeah. So, but I do want to caution people, because I do know some people who have been like, well, screw this, exclusivity thing with Audible, and they've gone for the 20%, and they're just not seing enough.
Yeah, I think it's really
non-Audible. I mean, Audible. I mean, everyone used to say, Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla, and they are, and they still are. But when it comes to audio, Audible is like the 4,000-pound gorilla, right? Like if you're not on Audible, you're not anywhere, right? Now, I talked a moment about Recorded Books, who I love. I love Recorded Books. I think they're just a great organization, always treat us with a great deal of respect. I love them. And what they've been saying to me is, Robin, you really need to sign your books with us rather than Audible Studios, because we have broad distribution, right? Not only are we on Audible, but we're also, in the libraries, and we're also on, I can't remember, Downpour. And
yeah, there's a bunch of them. Bibliotheca, right? And
yeah, and we're in all these places. And I keep telling my person there, I'm like, yes, but every 6 months when I get my royalty report, my Audible number is this, and the combination of all those other ones is this little itty bitty. And he keeps saying, yeah, but that's going to change, and that's going to change. And he's been saying it for 6 years, right? And I do think at some point it will change. I mean, there will be people who come into the market, and, there is going to be, a little more opportunity. But until that happens, you really are better off staying with 40%.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazon than doing 20% with these other players and 20% with Amazon.
And my prediction is where that disruptor is going to be something like BookFunnel, where
maybe,
because when you think about it, what happens there is you have this app that's now on Apple and Android that people have been getting their ebooks in for years, and they're used to using it. All of a sudden now they can start getting their audio in it.
Right.
So the actual app, the thing that you're using, is on your phone and you're used to using it. It's easy. What you don't see is behind that, all these authors are aggregating their book sales into there. So for you as the listener, it's easy because you have the thing like Audible, in the sense of it's just a one-stop place for me to listen to all my books. I don't have to have the Michael J. Sullivan app and the Joe Solari app and the Dakota Crowd app. It's all in that one spot. I think that's what might be the thing that changes things, because in the end, it's the content is what they want.
It is, but here's what I think needs to happen. Okay. See again, we started publishing before Kindles existed. And when we first started self-publishing, back when Kindles first came out, we had a 35% royalty rate. That's what it was, 35%. Then Apple came in and they had that whole DOJ thing and so forth. And overnight, my income doubled, because suddenly, for no reason that we could explain, Amazon was willing to give us 70%, right? And the reason they were willing to give us 70% is because Apple was going to give you 70%, and they needed to be competitive with Apple. So I don't think BookFunnel is a big enough player to make Audible say, well, instead of this 40-20, we'll allow you to be 40 and be multiple platform, or we'll go to 80, we'll go to 80-40 or something. I mean, In other words, there has to be like a Google or an Apple or some really big company, right?
A threat.
A threat, a huge threat for them to kind of like change.
I hear you, but here's where I think the threat is. The threat isn't some big tech company. The threat is guys like you, because the reality is two. Well, but it's the 2% of authors make up 60% of the revenues. And if you all start taking more and more of that yourself, it's going to make it harder for them to have, they're going to have to give you better deals.
You're missing something. You're missing something huge.
Okay, let me hear.
There's a reason why that doesn't happen. And it's because people who are, let's say, Stephen King level really don't need any more money.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Stephen King saying, please tax me more because I have more money than I need. I mean, and this could go to the other people, and I don't know how to disperse it. So federal government, take it. There's a lot of people, when you get to a certain level to where you have more money than you can spend, there's really no point in it. Now you're writing just because you like writing, and you're writing because you like hearing people say, I like what you did. The money stops being an issue, because if you have more money than you could possibly spend, what's the point? So for the little guy starting out, you're like, oh God, yes, it would be so great if this happened. But when you get to that level, what you're looking for is not money. What you're looking for is convenience.
Yes. Convenience.
You just want to be able to say, I'm writing this and tossing it, and you take care of it, and I don't have to deal with it anymore, because I don't care if I ever see a royalty check from that. All I want to know is it's out there and it's doing good. And that's what they're looking for. So when you get to that level, that, yeah, the players who could make the changes don't, because it's not in their best interest to. Everyone assumes that making money is in your best interest, but at that level, it's actually the literal convenience of having a company just take care of it for you.
That's certainly part of it, but there's, all I can think of is, like, I obviously watch too much Shark Tank, but I'm channeling my Mr. Wonderful here.
Mr. Wonderful.
And they're going to.
You're going to tell me I'm dead to you?
No, they're going to squash you like the cockroach.
Like a bug.
But for years, I really did think, like, when we were with a very small press, and then we started doing self-publishing and doing very well with self-publishing. And then eventually we did sign with traditional publishers, and then we left traditional publishers, and now we're back with self-publishing. And along that arc, you heard a lot of indies saying, oh, death to traditional publishers. They're gonna fall. I don't think they will ever fall. And here's what I don't think they will ever fall. I have seen too many well-earning self-published authors go to the traditional route for that boost in readership. We were one of them. Mm-hmm. And I don't regret the fact that we did that. I think it was the smart move to make. I'm glad we did it. But I see too many doing it for, like, not nearly as good of deals that we got, and also staying too long, right? Like they go over and, they're like, well, we'll do it for one thing. And they get into the cycle, and they keep, they kind of keep cycling around it. And Michael has this great term for traditional publishing, and it is institutional exploitation, because there are so many incredibly horrific aspects to a traditional publishing contract. I mean, truly, they are completely draconian.
It's the concept that if you were a frog and you were dropped into that contract, you would freak out and jump out. But because it's become institutionalized, people don't notice it.
Yeah, you boil life. And the thing of it is, the one thing that happens is because there are so many people, Michael included, most authors included, who, when they were 9 years old and they started writing their first book, they said, all I want to do is write, have my books in the bookstore, and be a real author. And for a lot of people, self-publishing is not a real author, even though the self-publishers are making
so much more money,
20 times what the traditional published authors are, and selling way more books because their books are more reasonably priced. They're not thought of as
it's funny
real.
because self-published authors are like, gee, if I could just be in a bookstore and be respected for an author, that's what I want.
And the traditional
publishers is doing the same thing, going, gee, if I could just make enough money that I could actually, like, write all day instead of having to have a day job.
Yeah.
So
I I think there's a fair number of people, okay, who will stay with traditional publishers or who will go traditional publishers because that is the realization of a dream, and they don't care how badly they're screwed in the process.
Yeah, it's the other thing I've seen. I've got a client two clients are kind of dealing with this now, is now that they've kind of gotten to a certain level with their indie publishing, traditional publishers are coming to them, or the other is.
Yes, but they're not coming to them with the types of numbers that they need to come to them with.
Right. Well, the one which is,
if you take a pay cut, sure,
right, but they do think about it, because it's like, well, not that I'm going to give them my main series, but if I do this work with them, will it help my other stuff? I'm not looking to do this. It's all part of like how I can build audience. And certainly when it's somebody like, it's not a traditional publisher, but it's like, say, Montlake.
Who?
Montlake.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Right. So they have this affiliation with Amazon,
right,
and they're kind of straddling both worlds. And it's like, wow, that becomes interesting.
Yes. And it's a very fluid thing, but, and again, this is just my opinion, and, I may be like completely wrong on that. I think some of that boat has sailed from the standpoint of when Thomas and Mercer and Montlake and 47 North first started. There weren't very many titles in those properties, so they would get a lot of push from Amazon, right? Because if Amazon's going to push their title or Del Rey's title, they're going to push their title, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they've got so many books in there, and they're publishing so many books each quarter that they've almost become more like the traditional publisher in the standpoint of, you gotta, like Mike says, you gotta pick like the 10 titles that you're gonna push, and then the other 600 are just gonna get like just the little flickest of scraps from the table, and maybe if you know that you're gonna be one of those 10, then you're gonna be in it. But there's all kinds of other factors that come into play here. Like for a long time, I kept saying to Mike, maybe we should do a 47 North release, because look, we got the indie stuff surrounded, we got the traditional surrounded. The only thing we don't have is the Amazon imprint. And Mike kept pushing back on me And now I think that boat has sailed, because there's another thing that comes into play here. Mark Lawrence, who's been traditionally published, I don't know why Mark doesn't self-publish. It's a complete mystery to me. He runs the SFPBO. He knows self-publishing.
Michael just said it. It's because he's got an easier, softer way.
Well, yeah, but he's not making, Mark Lawrence isn't making Stephen King money, right? I mean, he's making good money, don't get me wrong, but he's not making Stephen King money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a while ago, Mark Lawrence did a release through 47 North. Okay. It was for a science fiction title. And I thought, oh, I kept very close eye on that, because like Michael, he kind of did what I kind of thought Michael should do. I wanted to see I wanted to see which one of us was right. Was Michael right by staying out, or was I right by not going in?
By wanting to go in.
Yeah. And I think that actually hurt Mark, because, and this is the one thing that I didn't take into consideration that I now look at very seriously, all his titles in the 47 North line are at $3.99, sometimes $2.99, $4.99. His traditional publishers have his titles up at $13.99 initially.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at his backlist, all his backlists are at like $1.99, $2.99, because they're being driven down by that 47 North thing. Okay. Now, first of all, I don't think a self-published author should be at $1.99. I think that's too cheap for them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think they should at least be at $4.99, $5.99. That's just my feeling. Okay. But if you're traditionally published and you're at $1.99 and you're getting 14% of $1.99, you're hurting bad, right? Like the cheapest self-published books aren't at $1.99. Right. But his backlist had to go down to some of those levels, because his 47 North brought those down. Now, now don't get me wrong. The stuff that he's got coming out at $13.99, it still sells very well. I mean, I watch the ranks on them and they do well, but they do well for a very short period of time. And then they go right down to like a $5.99, $6.99. And if you're at $5.99 to $6.99 as a self-published author, you're doing good.
Yeah.
$5.99, $6.99 through a traditional author, you ain't doing so well.
Because of the percentage you're making off the book.
You know, one of the things, now again, in what we had done, you know, all of Mike's publishers have his ebooks at $9.99 and above. Okay. So what do we publish our self-published books at? They're at $9.99.
Yeah.
And they sell just fine. Now they don't sell as well as someone at $4.99, but we're making, you know, we make the difference in.
So I'm confused.
In the money.
What does all this have to do with Kickstarter?
We're just.
That's how it goes when we get on here, right? Like,
I mean, this was Kickstarter, right?
We're talking.
He's going to have
business.
to like
talking author business.
We're talking about author business.
Yep. These are the secrets here, man. This is what people want to hear about.
Yeah.
No one wants to hear from us. Look at us. We live in a cabin in the middle of nowhere.
That's true. We do.
What could we possibly know?
I don't know. I know a few things. Maybe you.
Yeah.
I know a few.
Well, I think you guys should be really proud of what you've done.
We are.
At least you got one.
I'm proud of what she's done.
Yeah.
Well, I'm proud of what you've done because I can't write a book.
Yeah.
I mean, if you.
Well, you know, somebody's got to make the sausage.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. You know, I'm fortunate in the fact that, you know, he gives me good ammunition to put in the cannon, you know, and I just got to let people know about it. But, you know, going back to what Michael said, you know, about like Stephen King and so forth. I mean, I do all this stuff, Kickstarters, you know, doing large print runs, selling direct. I sell a lot of books direct, I do all these other things. And the reality is, if I didn't do any of those things, we would still live very comfortably. But I do them because I'm obsessed with.
I'm curious the answer to this one.
I feel like I'm contributing.
I mean, it's true at this point. I could live on the royalties that I've built up. But I mean, it's like, so why are you doing this? She kills herself. I mean, she works harder now. That I told her
I've worked
about
less.
10 years ago. I said, you can
work less.
You can retire now.
I work less than I used to.
No, the only difference is you don't have to dress up, put heels on, and go out. You can lie on the couch.
I like a feeling that I'm contributing to the household income.
Yeah.
And B, I like trying these things out and learning these things and telling other people about these things. If I'm not doing it, if I'm not in the trenches and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and, you know, a lot of this comes from trying something and then seeing, you know, like that whole thing with Del Rey. You know, I didn't think I could ever make that kind of money self-publishing. Well, I was wrong. You know, I shouldn't have taken that contract. Now, on the other side of it, you know, your brand went up significantly when Del Rey started putting you out in hardcover. So, you know, but you can't, you know, Mike wants the easy route. Mike wants, you know, he just wants, he would rather be the Stephen King with just, I turn over a book and it disappears.
Well, let's put it this way. If she died.
Oh, you would be traditionally published forever.
Well, I either would be traditionally.
Or you wouldn't write again. You wouldn't write again.
Well, no. Well, yeah, that might happen too. But other than that, let's say you divorced me.
Far more likely than me dying.
So if that were to happen, I would probably just self-publish and put it out on Amazon. And there would be no more Kickstarters. There would be no more print runs because that would just, I'm not going to go that effort.
Yeah.
Right.
She does.
But the other
she loves my readers even more than I do.
But the other reason why I do this, okay, is because like if you look at like some of what I'm trying to do to the audio narrator industry and the fact that I want them to get royalties and the fact that we do Kickstarters, it's because I get really incensed when these middlemen who do nothing, well, I can't say nothing. Okay. So they make the book successful. But the reality is Michael and Tim are the creatives. They are the ones who develop the story and, you know, and produce it in a way that's compelling, and they get the crumbs and everyone else gets all the cheese. Right. And that just incenses me. So if I can cut out, the retailer chain by selling directly through Kickstarter, I'm happy for that, because they take 80%, 90%, and they didn't do anything, from a standpoint of
Creating the product.
Creating the product,
Yeah.
So it just incenses me, I have no problem paying Mark Simonetti top dollar for a cover. I have no problem paying our copy editors top dollars for the wonderful job that they do, because they're actually producing it, but when you have a system by which, you print all the books, you pay to have them shipped to the warehouse. If they come back as returns, you have to take them returns. And then someone takes, 60% just for passing these things back and forth.
In a logical,
that's hard to
in a logical word, the numbers would be switched, right?
Right.
The person who created the thing
would
would make
get
the most
60,
money.
and then if they want
Yes.
30 or 40 for the
Right.
little bit of thing they do, fine. But it's not that way,
Yeah.
And if you add up, the publishers, the agents, the warehouses, the retail chain, and the distributors, they're taking 90% of the money. That core group of people. And what I do is I cut most of them out through the sales that I do myself. Now, I'm not going to cut off my nose to spite my face. It's not like I'm going to take my books off Amazon, because they're taking 30% or 40% for the VOD or whatever, but it doesn't mean that I can't outdo them at their own game and sell my stuff for the same price. The reader's paying the same price either way. He would much rather have, 9 of his $10 going into our pocket than having 1 of his $10 going into our pocket.
Yeah. And I think that's the other part of that equation is the audience, right? And there's going to be some people that they're just lazy, and Amazon's easy.
Yeah.
And they've made it super easy for us to do that. A lot of ways I'm that way, but there are other people that they want to be connected with you. They want the special product. They want to see emails come for you saying, hey, it's time to put your name in the book.
Right.
And they're prepared to spend. Like, that's the crazy thing too, is what's the top level of your Kickstarter?
Oh, so my Kickstarters are very reasonable, right? Like I look at like Brandon Sanderson's, like his lowest level was like $50. And I think his highest level was like 400 or 600. Or I don't know what. Terry Brooks right now, look at what Terry Brooks' highest level is, like $1,200 or something. And people are doing it.
Yeah.
Now, I won't do that just because, quite frankly, I don't want people. If someone spends $1,200 on one of Michael's books, that's like a whole bunch of money they couldn't spend on other books, right?
Or food.
Our highest level is $100, and that gets you a limited edition copy. It gets you a regular hardcover, and it gets you the ebook. The ebook is $10. The regular hardcover is $25, and the special edition hardcover is $65. Okay, and I think that's a good value. Okay, but I see some of these Kickstarters where I've seen Kickstarters where people have spent $5,000.
Oh yeah,
to be in a Kickstarter. And I just won't do that. There was a time when, like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Tuckerization is very big on Kickstarters. And someone will say, well, like, if you pledge at this level, if you spend $1,500, I will tuckerize you. In other words, I will interject you as a character into the book. I will use your name as a character in the book. Now, I thought that was kind of cool, like people being able to say this character in the book is based off of me. But what I didn't like was the fact that you'd have to pay some huge sum of money. So for one of my Kickstarters, I did allow tuckerization, but you know what I did? It wasn't a level. It was everyone who was in the Kickstarter. Okay.
It's a lottery.
It was a lottery. When they filled out their survey, it says, would you like to be tuckerized? And if so, what name would you want and why? Okay. And then I drew a random number and that person became tuckerized. But then when I read through some of the comments, there was like someone who had a comment in there that said something like, I'm submitting my friend who, has like, I don't know, Lou Gehrig's disease or something. They just, it was a very touching story.
Yeah.
So Mike got mad at me because at the 11th hour on this one particular book, I started tuckerizing people left and right without like the person that got the drawing got in automatically, no question. But then just based off of some of these stories, like there was this one person, like he had some sort of deformity and he always thought of himself as a knight and he always thought of himself as a strong, heroic person. So I made him a hero, like in the book, and so what drove Mike crazy is suddenly at like the 11th hour, a lot of his characters, and he would talk about, Stanley Necker got changed to Sherman Jerami. And then the girl who loved the painter. Missa May got changed to
Marissa May. Really, they were very close. But yeah, so from now on, whenever I talk about my books and talk about that book, I'll make reference to characters. And people will look at me and go, who?
Because he knows about like the characters. He knows what I'm asking. Because I just took a bunch of people and I threw in it. But again, I didn't want that. I thought that was a really cool thing for someone.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be something that was only available to the elite. It's only available to the people with the deepest pockets. So, I just did it, a slightly different way, and but I mean, Terry Brooks has got some pretty expensive stuff in his Kickstarter. I mean, he has 182,000, but I have a lot more backers not a lot of people can afford, some of his prices. And I'm not saying his stuff's not worth it. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, Sean Speakman makes a beautiful book, and I'm sure they will be beautiful copies. But they're also not copies that like any Joe off the street can get.
Yeah, those are for the elite of the elite, right? Yeah.
Which is it's a perfectly fine strategy to make for your Kickstarter. But that's one of the things you think of. Like my Kickstarters, I have a $5 pledge level. I have a $10 pledge level. I have a $35 pledge level. I have an $85 pledge level. And I have a $100 pledge level. So my highest pledge level is $100, and you get 3 things for that. So I think that's a good deal.
And it ends
tomorrow at 7 p.m.
All right.
Tuesday, February 23rd.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys giving me the time to share how you're doing all this stuff. And I know you're already funded, but, I know at the last few hours, it always picks up a little bit. So that'll, congratulations. And
I think it funded in 6 minutes.
It did.
It was crazy. Like I was writing a post about it. And by the time I got my post out, it was already funded.
Yeah. It funded in 6.5 minutes. It hit 100K in like 4.5 hours. And it became our top funded Kickstarter in just a tad over 4 days.
I hope the book's good.
It is good.
Yeah.
I've read it. It is good.
And you just did like one post on Facebook, right? And then.
Yeah. So I did So.
Yeah, we need to talk to you about this.
Yeah, so we're not on Facebook very often. I mean, you were talking to us on Facebook. We were not seeing it because we're not on Facebook.
Facebook is a platform we rarely ever visit. I mean, we go there like once every 4 years and then went, oh, look, people send us mail. How odd. I hope it wasn't important.
Yeah, it's. I feel really bad sometimes because like every once in a while we'll go over to Facebook and go, oh, these poor people, they think we're insensitive and we're uncaring. It's just that we never go on the platform.
I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of things that do we even have an Instagram account? Like,
I actually made you an Instagram account a long time ago. I think there's like 5 posts.
and I don't go on Twitter all that often, but so it's like we're really not as social media savvy as we appear to be.
We are not.
We're getting old now. Okay, at this age, we're like, what's a computer again?
Well,
is your flip phone charged?
Well, some people. I mean, there are a lot of people who are much more socially savvy than we are, and I'm in the old days. Very, very active on Goodreads and still pretty active on Goodreads even to this day.
Goodreads, Reddit, we hit those occasionally on Twitter.
Yeah, but even those
even those we're slacking on because we're getting tired now.
You got Kickstarters to
How
run.
hard I'm working, but I promise you, I work less hard than I used to.
Congratulations.
Don't I? Seriously. No, seriously. You think about it.
I don't know. You seen the
Are you having fun?
I'm definitely having
Sometimes.
fun.
Okay, that's all that matters.
But part of the reason why, and I'll tell you why I'm working less time, because I spend more time with my exercising program than I am with. I've lost 65 pounds in a couple of months, and
wow.
And I've got like another, how many more to go? 40, 30?
Well, you lost a lot recently, but I mean, you've been losing ever since summer. Because, well, when the pandemic happened, we literally live across the street from a national park. So together we went hiking every other day, and that started it. And then she got on this really great diet.
Yes, but if I was working as much as I used to work, could I have gone for a walk every other day in the park? Could I take an entire afternoon off?
I don't know.
No,
Maybe.
no, definitely not.
See, living the dream.
I want her to retire. She won't. She refuses to.
Are you going to retire?
Him?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
I retired, I think, when I was 18.
Michael.
I've never really worked.
Mike does not work very hard.
I worked for 7 years out of my life.
Yes.
And then I said, this is stupid. And ever since then, I've run my own company, or I've been self-employed.
He doesn't play well with others.
No, I do not.
I can relate to that.
So, I mean, I had an advertising agency, and when I did that, I realized, wow, I can get paid several times for the same ad. That's a great idea. And then eventually I figured, hey, if I sell a book, I will get paid for that. Presumably it's any good. I'll get paid for that for the rest of my life. I'm like, that's a much better retirement plan than any other retirement plan I've ever heard of.
No, but because writing is a creative process.
It's not something I ever did for money.
Yes, but it's also something you don't do for very long. You can only write for 4 hours a day. Now many authors can write, 8 hours a day. Mike can't. After 4 hours.
Actually, I don't know of a single author who would do that, but
I know some.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I know. Yes.
I can't name one.
I know people who write 12 hours a day, for sure.
Those poor people.
I know. But Mike can't, if he writes more than 4 hours, whatever he writes is just got to be redone anyway. So it's not
it becomes
worth,
crap.
It's not worth.
It's like anything. If you do it too long, you slack off. You don't do as well.
Right.
So you're just going to redo it anyway. So what's the point? So yeah, I'd work for 4 hours a day, and then the rest of the day might be, I'll conceptualize the story, which is not quite the same thing. It's called daydreaming. Most people do it. But yeah, so I have fun. I mean, so I've never really worked. I mean, well, I have worked, but I haven't worked in a professional manner in what I would consider to be work in ages. And so this is something I will continue to do because it's fun. But I probably will do it at a slower pace than I've been doing, because I now, have the means to enjoy life. So we may try that if it ever happens. I mean, if the world ever goes back to a sense of normality, we might actually do some things that I've never had the opportunity to do.
Yeah. So at the end of about a year ago, we put out 3 books in the span of 6 months, which for a lot of indie authors, that's not unusual at all. For us, it's damn near impossible. Yeah. And it just about killed me between like running the beta programs and doing the copy editing and dealing with the printers. I mean, I was near broke. And the plan was for all of 2020, I was going to relax and take it easy. I had booked us, a apartment in Paris for the entire month of May. I had a trip to Key West. I had another trip to New York.
It was the first time we were ever going to try traveling, because we never had either.
So you started this.
So apparently this is
God does not want me to go on vacation, because the other thing I did is I bought a Jeep and a teardrop camper, and we were going to go to all the national parks out west. We were literally going to get into it and be tumbleweeds and just like go where the wind took us. And we were going to go to all the national parks. And
apparently everyone's life got put on pause.
Yeah.
And other people's lives got destroyed. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, I'm really incredibly fortunate, because my life really hasn't changed tremendously. It just didn't, go the way we were hoping, but it did get worse. I mean, this is the same thing we do all the time. So,
right. So So when the country covers, we are hoping that we will take a little bit of time off and do a little bit of traveling.
Either that or I had to start writing post-apocalyptic novels.
Don't do that.
But those are nonfiction now, so
Yeah, they are.
Yes.
They are. They are. So I will work less as soon as I'm allowed to travel.
there you go.
It's like, I will be happy once I finish these books to like take a break. But if the world doesn't, then I guess I'll be writing the next book.
Right.
Yeah, you got,
Mike had a great time all summer. He sat out at the pool and
I wrote.
and no, you went over all your books.
Well, I listened to all my books and I took notes in preparation of doing the series.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Well, guys, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the time you spent, and we'll have to catch up again. Or if you do get to travel and you get to Chicago, we'll have to grab a coffee.
So we have this little thing. I'll send you the little link. It's called In Case You're Ever Out This Way, and our fans can put their name and their city in there, and then when we get in that teardrop, we're going to be traveling around to various.
All right.
places, and we'll like go out for coffee with.
We're gonna go on tour, man. We're gonna bring the band.
We're gonna bring the
There
band.
you go.
And from now on, talk to us in email rather than.
I will send emails from now on. Now that I know that you're shunning.
It's not shunning. We're just inept. We're just
Yeah.
Inept
platform.
and sometimes lazy. Because there's just so many platforms came up on.
Yeah.
You can't do anything in depth. So
You're not missing anything. All right, guys.
Mark Zuckerberg is not going to be happy with you. He's listening.
That's right. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.